Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for coming back. Task force, we were in task force on screen time. Be a lot of movement today, depending on whatever you want to do. And so we're going to kind of get right into it. Hopefully you did receive the latest version of things, but I know that Brian and Ava will be going over with you the process, and they'll probably be repeating that each time we get together. But you're, I know, getting already kind of understand it. So with that, again, welcome. I will turn it over to our co-chairs.
Thank you, Commissioner. I first of all want to thank you all for being here today and for advocating for the students of Kansas. So we're going to start today by giving a quick overview of today's agenda, which Peyton has brought onto the screen. And before we start with voting, we wanted to review two documents that Peyton sent out yesterday, and these are really important to help you understand exactly what's going on. So once we review these documents, we'll move right into the first motion, discussion, and voting process, and we'll repeat this process as many times that are necessary with this motion. So first, we're going to pull up the recommendations and voting procedures document. So to review, you were sent a list of all of the recommendations that have been brought up during the breakout sessions and that were submitted by the members of this group. So we are going to go into more detail on this document in a moment. Before that, we wanted to review the voting procedures and give you a few other notes. We are going to continue to do breakout rooms before we begin voting on one of each of these topics. Because we did a breakout room on the personal device topic last week, we will not be doing a breakout room this week. The next breakout session will be at the beginning of the screen time and mental health session. So as soon as we move on to that next portion, then we'll begin breakouts again. But today, in an effort to keep our business moving, we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
All right. Thank you, Ava. The first thing we're going to talk about is the procedure for raising hands. The voting process will be the same as it was last week, but we do want to mention during discussion the importance of raising your hand before bringing up a point. If you continuously interrupt, you may be muted or potentially removed if it becomes a significant problem. We want to ensure that everyone's voices are heard, which we can only do if people's hands are raised. This also means that we may call on people from time to time who have not spoken before, calling on someone who we have heard several times. The next thing we want to talk about is time management and discussions. And this is a really important point that we want to make. After a motion has been made and seconded, we will take up to 10 full minutes for discussion. It's important to note if we take 10 full minutes, though, we're not going to be able to get through everything. The report does have to be completed and presented to the state board on November 12th, so we will have to schedule additional meetings if we're unable to move through the recommendations quickly enough. Please take the time that you need during discussions, but please realize that we do have a deadline that has to be met and that we do not have to use the full 10 minutes of every discussion. Lastly, on this document, there is a recap of each of the two surveys that explains where all of the motion recommendations has come from, as well as the outline for the final report. I'm going to turn it back over to Ava.
Thank you, Brian. And the next document that you received yesterday, it's called Motion Recommendations, which Peyton's going to pull up in a second. And it has all of the recommendations that have been brought up for each of the three topics. So next to each of these recommendations is a note that will tell you where it came from. So these recommendations aren't just out of the blue. They come either as a recommendation from a breakout room or they were submitted by a member of the task force. We also reformatted this document to hopefully make it a bit clearer than what was originally presented. Because there were some recommendations that cannot go together, those were put under one category as option A, B, C, and so on. This was also done in situations where there were multiple recommendations that said similar things but were worded differently. So for example, when we ask for a motion on recommendation number 2, you would choose to make your motion based on option A, option B, or option C. In this situation, if someone makes a motion on option A and it passes, we would not be able to make a motion on option B as well because they contradict each other. So you're really going to try to pick one of those options from the number that you've selected. And Brian will go ahead and explain this further.
All right. Thank you, Ava. Like last week, you will be able to make adjustments to the wordings of a motion if necessary, as long as the original person who made the motion agrees. What we would like to do is we would like to avoid is adding multiple recommendations into every single motion. It will help with clarity if we keep the topics separated, which is why we have broken them up the way that we see them here. We do want KSDE to take a moment to talk about how some of this will look in the final report. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Peyton for a quick explanation.
Thank Peyton. We're not hearing you. No, fortunately, no.
I can take it, Peyton. If you want to share the slides, we'll just go over really quick how we think some of the formatting of the report will go together. So we've proposed to the co-chairs that we have a set definition section. So going into the report, those that haven't been a part of the task force know the terms that we're talking about. We're also hoping this makes each recommendation a little less lengthy and easier to get through. So an example that the group discussed last week on elementary policies, we would put in the definition section the definition of personal electronic devices. So that doesn't have to be defined in each motion unless it is changed for a certain grade range. And then we would also define bell to bell. So the example of the recommendation from last week would be the task force recommends elementary schools implement a bell-to-bell personal electronic device policy for students. And then those terms would be otherwise defined in the report.
All right. Thank you, Gabby. Before we move into voting, are there any questions on this process? Okay, Ava.
Awesome. So if there are no more questions, we'll put the order up on the screen and get this process going. So the document that's going to be shared shows the order of motions and shows how popular they were in the survey. So since we went through the first recommendation last week, we've already got that checked off. Does anybody have a recommendation for motion number 2? Amy?
I would like to make a recommendation for number 2 based on option B, that we recommend elementary students store personal devices in a secure location not accessible to them during the school day.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Does somebody second that?
I second that. Sue Bowley.
Sue, I'm sorry, we need to go with the hand raise. Scott?
Oh, sorry.
I would second that.
Thank you, Scott. Okay, now that we have a motion, do we have any discussion? Erica?
I don't know if I lowered the hand correctly, so tell me if it's still up.
No, it's gone. Thank you.
It's gone. Okay. Is it possible to almost make a motion to meld A and B, like something that would say kind of a combination of the two, right? That like this, like you would almost have like B, but then say, right, like that, like the local policy, locally defined policy. We would, what am I trying to say? Trying to favor, like, to say locally defined policy, right? So you're kind of almost blending B and A together as one. Does that am I making sense? Sorry if I'm confused.
Yeah, it makes sense. See, Amy, were you the original motion maker?
Yes, I was.
Amy, since you were the original motion maker, it's up to you if you want to amend your motion or keep it as is.
I would like to keep my original motion, option B, as stated in the document. Thanks.
Okay, that sounds good. Other discussion items, please.
Okay, if we don't have any more discussion, in a moment you will see the poll come up on your screen. And then, Erica, do you have something to discuss?
Just a quick question. I guess I would just be curious, is there any downside to integrating option A as an additional kind of corollary to option B? Just wondering what the thoughts are on that.
John?
I don't know if this would answer the question. I think B sets out a policy that is going to have districts have to make some sort of local determination. It just won't be spelled out. It's just not spelled out in B, but I think that would be the way I would take it is that's a recommendation to me as a school. Well, I have to figure out what my policy is going to be on the location. So it's not written there, but I think it might be implied.
Melanie?
Thank you. I think John makes a good point, and I absolutely understand, if you look at the different aspects of each of these potential motions, I would just offer, as a member of the State Board of Education, when this task force is finished, these recommendations will come to our board. And so I want to encourage any conversation here, because that will give the board more information to work with when we meet and go over this. So while there will be, I assume, a written document delivered to the board and a presentation that will be delivered, any board member can go back and watch these videos, and I'm sure that some of them are watching right now. So I just want to encourage the conversation, and if you have a reason, pro, con, whatever, for one of these motions, please speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, Melanie. Very well said.
Do we have any other discussion?
I see Danny's hand is up.
Oh, I didn't even see it. Danny, you can go ahead.
Thank you. Again, I don't know why we're telling 287 school districts making a recommendation about what they do with the storage if they're going to do that. So I'm sorry, but I don't understand that. Let each school district make their own policy. Okay, they got to make a policy at the elementary level. We'll let them make a policy on the storage if that's what you're going to do. Because we don't have any parent input here. And I think we need to hear from the parents and hear from the local boards need to make that. That's my humble opinion.
Katie, you can go ahead.
I'll chime in as a parent and also a local school board member. I think that option B is helpful because it is specific about being inaccessible, whereas option A leaves it up to that district. And as these are just being recommendations, I prefer option B so that it's clear that what we're recommending is that they're inaccessible during the day, not just that there's a policy that says something.
Okay, Kim.
I am a parent as well, and I want to echo with what was just said, that with this recommendation, it's best practice to have them inaccessible, the devices inaccessible. So I completely agree with what Katie just said.
Okay, I can't, for some reason it's not showing your name, but I see
I'm sorry.
you can, no,
It's
you're
Lori.
fine.
It's Lori Barnes. I want to just piggyback on Katie and Kim. I am a parent and I am also a school board member, and I thought I was going to say the exact same thing. So thank you for speaking up.
Erica?
Kind of tossing out a question to the group. Is anybody else besides Danny and myself, and if I misunderstood you, Danny, please feel free to correct me. Anybody else uncomfortable telling people that we're the state telling them what's going to happen with their personal private property here, instead of allowing what the Constitution of the state puts the authority in the local school district? And then the local parents and the local boards and the local administration can have that discussion and figure out what's best for that community, which is what the state constitution, has the process to be.
So I'll circle back to whatever we present to the board, and whatever that comes out is going to be a guidance, and state or individual school districts will be able to interpret that as they see fit and implement that as they see fit. Camille, I'm sorry, I hope I said your name right. Sorry, can you unmute, Camille?
Yes, you said it right. Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I guess my question is, are we voting on the storage policy?
Yes, we're voting
Okay.
on motion 2.
I was kind of confused there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so if there's no more discussion, in a moment, your poll will come up on the screen for you to vote on this recommendation. And as a reminder, a motion must get majority of the yes or no in order to pass. So that will go ahead and come up on your screen shortly. Okay, last call for any more votes, and then the poll will be closed.
Okay, it looks like with a percentage of 81%, that motion passed.
Okay, we're now going to move on to recommendation number 3. Is there a motion on recommendation 3? Scott? Oh, we can't hear you. Could you unmute?
I would move option B. We recommend that middle school implement a bell-to-bell policy for a phone-free school.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Do we have a second on that? Carol?
I second.
Okay. Thank you. We'll now open this up for discussion. Erica?
Hi. I was wondering if we could consider again a blend here. I think it would be a blend this time of C and A, which would move with that recommendation and the fact that we'd be making those recommendations. It would signal that we think that there should be something done there. We're kind of steering them in the way that we'd like, while also recognizing where the actual authority lies, right? Yes, I understand we're making recommendations. I get that. But when we come out and make a recommendation with a bell-to-bell ban of anything, it's going to have more weight than just a suggestion. So we got to be realistic about that.
Amy?
I went back over the list of things we were supposed to consider for these recommendations that you guys had listed last week about does research show support for our recommendations, and does it empower local control? And I think that option B relies heavily on the research that shows that having bell-to-bell policy with phones out of the classroom, which also then helps socially with kids during lunch hours and during passing periods, that we would be hitting those different change making points during the day with the bell-to-bell policy. That's going to bring a lot of benefit. And because it's a recommendation, we still allow for that local control while showing what the gold standard is, and showing a way that we can really move the needle so that we're not just encouraging schools to do the same thing that they have been doing, and expect change to come from that.
Okay, thank you, Amy. Any other comments for discussion on option 3 or motion 3, sorry?
Erica?
Just a quick process question. And I'm just kind of quickly trying to scan to see if I could answer it myself, but just so I'm clear, in terms of once the motion, once it's out there to make a motion, like on the next one coming up, is it the person who created the motion is making the motion and then we wait for a second?
If I understand your question correctly, yes.
Okay.
The person that makes the motion, and then we wait for a second, and then if there are any amendments, it has to go back through the person that made the motion.
Great. Okay, just want to make sure. I thought that was correct, but just thank you.
Danny?
I guess I'll go back to the same thing I've been talking about. I don't know why we don't let local school districts make the policy for the middle school also, whatever their local school district decides. Instead of the government making more recommendations. It's interesting to me that everybody wants the government to make a recommendation, and then they can blame the government that they have to do these things. I think that's very interesting from my perspective. Mean no disrespect to anybody. That's my personal opinion. Oh.
Okay, if there's no more discussion, then we will go ahead and pull Constance, you can go ahead.
I would just say that as an educator and a parent of grown children, the local districts have option A right now, and it's not working very well. It's not working at all at my level with freshmen. So that's, I guess, my comment.
Erica.
I think that's a valid point. And I think that's an actual problem that needs to be solved. I think Danny, again, if I am misunderstanding you, please feel free to correct me. But I think the point what Danny was saying to apply to that is there is a process to rectify that, and it's local, right? So it's between the local school board, the administrators, the parents and community. And if things aren't working, there is already a process and authority in place to be able to get that corrected. And if the people who are there, whether it's the administrators or the school board or what have you, aren't able to get that done, it may need to mean that there should be new people there. But I don't know that the state coming in and saying, okay, well, I know you have the authority and I know this is your job, but you're not doing a good job. So we're going to come in and do it for you. I just tend to find that there are more problems that way and less solutions. But I think your point is a good one. I just think the way that it needs to be addressed, there's already a process in place, and it's not having the state do the job.
Okay, Travis.
I think we're doing what the state board asked us to do, which is to compile information, report it back in recommendation form for local boards to pick up the mantle and look at it or not. I think there has been an absence of this information out for local school boards for a long time. And I think there's a time at which one makes a decision. It's, one of those things to be bold and to lead. And sometimes you're out on a pretty thin limb by that leading. And because of that, I think this group has that stead or that charge to maybe make some of those bold recommendations. It is the school board's responsibility locally, ultimately, to make those decisions locally to whether to pick up and to follow these recommendations, some of these recommendations, all of them or none of them. And I so that's where I've come to rest with that. So thank you.
Tana.
So we're not telling the government to codify anything in this process. This isn't becoming law. It's not becoming a requirement. It's not becoming civil code. All it simply is the state board doing what their mandate is, which is to guide and direct local boards. That's how our system works. And so they've asked us to create some guidance and direction for the local boards to look at and to determine. So I don't think even if we recommend that there's a bell-to-bell policy, that doesn't mean we're mandating or codifying anything. What we're saying is we as a task force have looked looked at the research. We have listened to the presenters. We have seen what has succeeded in other schools. And we have determined, based on what we have seen over these last several weeks, that this would be a great recommendation, and we're comfortable with recommending it. But we're not asking state lawmakers to codify anything here. It's simply a recommendation.
We have about 2 minutes left for discussion on this item, so we'll kick it over to Tanya real quick.
Thank you. And I put my hand up before the other people spoke, but I would agree with that. So the state school board gives us guidance, and sometimes at the local level, we have to look at that guidance and make it fit our system, because that is still our job. I 100% agree with that we at the local level have to make the guidance that fits our district and fits our community best. But I wholeheartedly agree that we have looked at all of the research that we have been given. We have been blessed to receive a lot, and we need to act on that. That's our charge. Thank you.
Thank you for the discussion, everyone. As we're nearing the end of our time, we're going to go ahead and vote on this motion. And this is just a reminder that we do need majority in favor in order for it to pass. So that'll come up on your screen shortly, and then we'll wait for all of our responses. Okay, we'll do another last call on our polls. And just a reminder, if you're having any trouble with voting or anything, you can always raise your hand, and we'll be sure to assist you in whatever you need. But we'll go ahead and do a last call for this motion. So it looks like that motion did pass. So we'll just keep rolling along, and we're going to go ahead and move on to our motion number 4. So Peyton will show that on the screen.
Lori.
I'd like to make a motion to recommend middle school students store personal devices in a secure location not accessible to them during the school day.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second? Constance.
Second. I second that.
Thank you, Constance. We'll now open that up for discussion for up to 10 minutes. Remember, if we do discuss in a shorter time frame, we can move through a little quicker as needed. Sue.
I do have a concern with this one because we are looking at storing cell phone devices in our school district. And it's a very costly situation if you go with pouches or that situation. So I'm very concerned about just stating that the devices are in a secure location. I think this one is probably really important for the school district to decide how that would happen, because it's a very expensive proposition to store them securely and officially and safely to protect the personal property.
Okay, Brian, we haven't heard from you today.
Just a little bit of personal advice. We implemented a policy at our district this year, and there's lots of options for inaccessible. We've chosen to go the route of having just a kind of a shoe storage hanger in each classroom. Inaccessible just meaning that students can't get to them, and secure being it's in wide view of everybody. Obviously, if you leave the classroom, it's locked. We've also told parents that inaccessible and secure could be in the student's personal locker. So all the comments about making that a local decision is fantastic. This is good advice, and local districts can decide how it best fits for them. There's lots of options.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Constance.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Oh,
I
okay,
apologize.
that's right. Kim.
I want to echo what Brian just shared. I recently toured a middle school in Washington, D.C., and their method of securely storing phones was they used just a zipper pencil pouch. And when the kids came in, they put their phone in their devices in that pouch, zipped it, and put it in the basket drawer. There was tables with all the baskets, like 6th grade were blue baskets, 7th grade were white baskets, 8th grade were orange baskets. And so each basket had their 7th hour teacher's name on it. It was placed on the same place on the table every day. So as the students entered, they just dropped their pencil pouch in that basket and on to class they went. Those baskets were then transported via rolling cart to the office where they were stored for the day. And at the very end of the day, the office staff delivered them to the 7th grade classroom. And when the final bell rang, teachers handed each kid back their pouch or their pencil pouch. So a pencil pouch is like a couple bucks. Baskets aren't that much. So there are options other than just Yonder, which is probably the most expensive option, but there are a variety. And I think schools can consider all those different options. Thank you.
Okay, Erica.
I appreciate what Brian shared, and I was actually, when I put my hand up, was hoping that maybe Tanya would share what Blue Valley is doing to address the issue. But I think that if we're going back to whatever, what so many people are saying is that we're just making recommendations, then I think the local school districts are more than capable of figuring out what to do and what they can afford and what makes sense for them. So I think we can make a recommendation without having to spell out how they implement it.
Brian.
Just going to reiterate a point I know that's been made, but maybe making it a different way. KSDE makes recommendations. I mean, a load of recommendations to districts, and it's all about best practices. I am a huge proponent of local control, but I do think it's nice that you have people that have had the time to research and find best practices to give recommendations to school districts on what those best practices are. And a lot of those recommendations, the school districts may, as a larger group, take advantage of it, but not everybody does. And that's where local control comes in, is that this is not a requirement or a policy. It won't be part of accreditation or anything like that. But this group has done a great job of researching, of reading, of taking a look at what best practices are. And I don't think the KSD should hesitate about making recommendations on best practices, and then local districts can make that decision for themselves as whether they take it up or not.
Okay, any other discussion on this one before we come to a vote? Amy.
I just really want to add fast that, like Kim said, there's some lower budget options for storing devices. And then also, I think that since the national conversation has moved this direction, there are some different things going through federally that are being considered, and then at the state level that could help with funding. And so making a recommendation based on what's going to make the most difference for the students will be helpful. And then I think that funding is like a separate thing that local districts can figure out how to address. I'll be brief. Thanks.
Thank you, Amy. Jose.
Hi. My question, I did put it up there, and somebody did answer. I was questioning more the liability that staff is taking, because we do, like, I work out of Wichita, and we do have, if students bring a device, personal device, it gets lost, it gets damaged, they're taking that risk bringing it. But I've also seen where if staff takes that device and it's taken from them, they are also taking, they're getting like, if the device gets taken and then it gets lost, it gets damaged while it's in the hand of somebody that's a school staff, they are then liable, and then they have to pay for the device. I have seen that go to court, and the staff or the school has to pay for that device. Because it's not that it gets lost or it gets somewhere in the school, it gets damaged. I understand the board has that, but I have seen it go the other way where, hey, let's say, for example, a teacher takes it, and this device is $1,500, and they were using it in class, they take it, and then it gets lost. Then they're held liable for the device.
Okay. Thank you, Jose. We have about 3 minutes left. If there's any more discussion. Lori.
I understand your concern, Jose. I think that's where you just have to, as a district or as your school board, has to write the policy around that to where it protects the school district. I know ours specifically says that we're not responsible for any damage done if those students choose to bring their devices to school.
Thank you.
Yeah, and like I said, we have one of those that says, all this, but it's still, I don't think it goes the same way. I'm just saying that, saying in a secure location, we need to make sure it's actually a secure location, not in a basket somewhere where it's accessible still to some students, some staff. That's the only thing that would be a concern.
Okay, Brian, last comment. We have about a minute left.
No, I'll make it quick. Just keep in mind that school districts have liability on all sorts of things. Just because something has a potential liability problem doesn't mean we don't take advantage of it or put it in place. Example I use to people all the time is that we do have table saws, and we allow students to use them. So what you do is you make that a local control issue again to take as much of the liability out as possible. But we can't operate school without having liability of some sort.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we'll go ahead and finish up our discussion, and we'll go ahead and vote on option B, which is to recommend that middle school students store personal devices in a secure location that is not accessible to them during the school day. So your poll will go ahead and pop up, and then you'll be able to vote on that. Okay, we're going to go ahead and do a last call on that motion as well. If anybody's having trouble again, please let us know, because we want everyone's voice to be heard. It looks like that motion did pass. So middle school students, the recommendation will be that middle school students store personal devices in a secure location that is not accessible to them during the school day. So with that being said, we will move on to motion number 5, which is the same kind of format just now with the high school level. Do we have a motion for that?
Okay, Chase.
Thanks, Brian. I'd make the motion that we recommend that high schools implement a bell-to-bell policy for phone-free schools in high schools.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Kim.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. We'll go ahead and move into discussion. Ava.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and talk about this because I think my other students left me alone today, but that's okay because I know they're super busy. But just from the student perspective, I'm currently in high school right now. And even though I know my classmates love to be on their phones a lot, I think it's really important that we do a bell-to-bell policy just for the social interaction. I'm really personally worried about my generation, and how we interact with each other. Oh, and Anya's here, perfect. And how we interact with each other. So I think it's important that we have that face-to-face interaction, and then as well as hands-on learning that isn't all on the screen. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Ava. Kim.
I appreciate you speaking up, Ava. That's really helpful. I was going to say something similar, that we need to think about the school day as not just academic, that the in-between times, the passing periods, the lunchtime are just as critical to child development. Like Ava was saying, that social engagement and learning face-to-face communication skills, really creating a sense of belonging and forming community. And when students have the opportunity between classes to be on their phone, then they're really missing out on those opportunities, even foundational skills of, being able to act on something without getting your parents' direction during the school day. School's a great opportunity to develop some independence when you're in a building with lots of other adults that are guiding you. I also wanted to just point out what we learned through the anxious generation, that we're really in an epidemic of mental illness for our youth, our teenagers. Again, reminder that suicide is the second leading cause of death for 10 and up. And so this age range is really impacted by social media and the harms from that. And kids, they need and they deserve that 7-hour-a-day break from pressure and harm.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Lindsay.
High school is a really tough age, and thinking about these options, bell to bell, designated use, are really difficult to think about because of both the points that the previous two commenters made around mental health and socialization are very, very important. We're also talking about a generation that more, as far as I'm aware, more often is working, carrying jobs, holding responsibilities for their families, and complete inaccessibility, maybe between classes, maybe during the lunch period, doesn't seem to necessarily be the right thing to do. I don't know the exact answer, just that there is a pause on my side from bell to bell.
Okay, thank you, Lindsay. Ananya.
I really agree with what Lindsay said. I also hesitate for a complete bell to bell recommendation, because there are times when if I have to go to work, all of a sudden I need to be able to tell my parents, I need to text my boss. If a practice is canceled really last minute, I need to be able to communicate that. The way my school works right now is similar to option C. We can't use it during class, but during lunch and passing periods, I don't think that like 5 minutes of passing period where we use our phone is really making like the big difference between um, like mental health issues or being impacted by social media. It's just a way for us to kind of be able to like touch base with our parents, other people we need to talk to. I also think that if there was a complete bell to bell ban, I know students in my school would be more hesitant, and there is a bigger push for like resistance towards that. There are kids who like already bring in like fake phones for just like putting it up. And I just think that bell to bell would cause that more resistance. Having a bit more flexibility, like during lunch, would allow for students to be more receptive to like this policy.
Okay, Erica.
I appreciate hearing everybody's comments. I would say that we're sending a bit of a mixed message in some of the comments so far. You know, we're either trying to instill and direct and coach them into independence. And I know we're trying to do that in school at every level, age appropriate wise, but of course we're now talking about high school. So we're trying to do that, but then we're not going to allow them to learn how to manage their situation and how to manage the natural consequences of when they aren't doing what they're supposed to do because they're either distracted by their phone or distracted by something else. I also think it's disingenuous to talk about the mental health issues around that. If we were to do a bell to bell for high school, and I realize we have a separate section to discuss school screens, but it's disingenuous to talk about, you know, this somehow helping mental health and suicide, but they're going to have full access to their school devices. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So it almost seems like it's hard to separate them. I know we're trying to do that for a reason. I realize there's some nuance there, but I think that has to really be seriously considered.
Okay, Anna.
Yeah, I teach at a high school where we have a bell to bell policy. And I in terms of the people that have advocated for, you know, having it out during passing periods and during lunch, and that, you know, I think the part of what the anxious generation talked about was the constant notifications and the interaction with social media and how, especially, you know, online bullying comes in, like that is leaving the door open for all of that to still take place during the school day and to become a distraction. And so, you know, you look at it during a 5 minute or during a 3 minute passing period. Well, is your brain still distracted, you know, 15, 30 minutes into your class? And so that's just, you know, what our school has seen a massive decrease in the amount of instances that the administrators have to deal with an outside issue of online bullying and that type of thing. So that's where I would advocate against a policy that recommends for phones to be, you know, allowed during at certain points during the day. And in terms of communicating with parents and that kind of thing, completely understand the need for it. I would say there's alternatives. You can email your parents. You can use the phone in the office. People use the phone in the office, you know, before cell phones were even around, and they were able to get a hold of their parents. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, Chase.
I really just want to echo a lot of what Anna just said. I mean, for 2 months now, we've heard from parents, we've heard from teachers, administrators, school board members. And I think, you know, going into this, I had a lot of thoughts on this issue, but having read all the documentation that we've been reading, the book we've read, and just hearing firsthand witnesses who deal with this every single day in our classrooms, I think it is just very vital that we do it bell to bell. For example, the reason Anna just mentioned about the school cafeteria. And there's a reason why our business community is moving employees back into the office, because we see that collaboration and that community and that face-to-face, the value of those relationships. And so, you know, communication and technology, it's great, but it's also important to have that human-to-human interaction. And I think one less distraction in the classroom and in the school building in general would just be helpful for everybody, for teachers and our administrators, and ultimately our students. I like to just point out that this isn't something that we're just deciding here on the whim. I mean, states all across this nation of all political persuasion is moving to this, and countries across Europe have done this. And so this is an international response to an international crisis. And so I think this is a very important issue, and I fully support a bell-to-bell ban.
Okay, thank you, Chase. Kim.
I wanted to reiterate that if phones are allowed at any time during the day, then the harm still exists, like Anna said. So it's best to have a bell-to-bell policy. Also, I think those that are concerned with getting messages during the day, whether they work or whatever, I think it sends a clear message that the school day is protected, that is not the time to communicate. And maybe we will be better planners if we figure out our work schedule or our pickup schedule in advance instead of having employers text during the day. I know that a lot of employers are concerned about, as students graduate from high school and come to work for them, that they don't have that face-to-face engagement or capability, eye contact with customers. So I think they would appreciate if we protected the school day and allowed kids to develop those skills so they'll be better employees when they graduate. Thank you.
Okay, Amy.
Thank you. I know I'm sharing a lot on this stuff today. I wanted to bring up, there was a conference that I watched, a panel of teachers and staff, and I can't remember if it was New Jersey or Philadelphia, but they talked about their move to using pouches and secured locations at the high school level, and mentioned that the changeover in their student body and the morale was, the effect was so positive, they in the end would have paid more for having their students do it, put their phones in pouches earlier, had they known the benefits that they were going to see. Also, when I talked with somebody from Yonder, I'm not a representative for Yonder, but I called just to get information about it. And he said that usually it's 2 to 3 weeks to kind of change the student behavior. And they have sometimes as much of a 70% initial success rate on these first lines of implementation for getting phones out of the classrooms. And so I think that for those, for this kind of a guidance, it can reap benefits in the first month of school that are going to be really measurable and meaningful. And then the last thing I wanted to say is remembering that it's not just, when I think about my students using that potentially, it wouldn't just be the one time that I call them and it disrupts that 1 3-minute passing period. For a lot of these kids, it's a 3-minute passing period plus lunch 6 to 7 times a day in between all the classes, 5 days a week. And you start to accumulate all those lost moments, and that can add up quite a bit. Thank you.
Okay, Ava will be the last of the comments because we'll wrap up our 10-minute time.
Sorry, Brian, and sorry, guys, for me wanting to comment again. I did want to comment a little bit on the mental health side of this. I'm honestly kind of nervous, but I really believe in this issue, so I'll share a personal story. So when I was 15 years old and a sophomore in high school, I was diagnosed with an eating disorder, as well as OCD. And I strongly believe that if phones weren't so prevalent, in my high school or so prevalent in society, that this wouldn't have been so harmful for me. And so as you're voting, I just encourage you to think about students that are struggling with mental health, or struggling with different situations in their high school, and kind of compare those trade-offs. Is being able to communicate with somebody outside of school worth the mental anguish that some of our other students are going to feel because they feel like phones are surrounding them all the time? So I just wanted to add that. Sorry. Thank you.
Appreciate you sharing that, Ava. Thank you. Okay, that wraps up our 10 minutes, so we're going to go ahead and move this into a vote.
Okay, we'll go ahead and do a last call on this poll. I hope it's coming through, and if I'm going too fast, I'm calling the last call, so please just let me know. Okay, it looks like that motion to recommend high schools implement a bell-to-bell policy for a phone-free school went ahead and passed. So Gabby's going to type in that data for us, and then we will move on to motion number 6.
Okay, Katie, we have not heard much from you today.
Thank you. I'd like to make a motion for option B to recommend high school students store personal devices in a secure location not accessible to them during the school day.
Okay, and Kim, do you have a second?
Yes, I second. Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up for discussion. Anna.
I'm going to share why I think this is very important as a high school teacher. Our school has implemented a policy that's supposed to keep kids from getting on their phones, and yet the kids still have access to those phones. So they're in their pocket, they're in their backpack, they're tucked up in their hoodie. There are those places, and as long as those kids can have access to the phones, as a teacher, I find that mine is about management. I find that I'm spending a lot of my day managing their access to the phones. Even if my policy is don't have the phone up, even if our policy at the district is contact the parents, write them up, it still is a continual fight with the majority of the kids in my classroom to say, put it away, the sign is up, don't get it out, take the earbuds out, and I turn my head and the phone's back out and the earbuds are back in. So as long as those phones, and this is for the majority of my students, as long as those phones are accessible, those earbuds are accessible, the students will continually go after them, regardless of how much we want to believe that we can teach them to do different, no matter how much we want to say that a reminder, a call home, any of those things might discourage them. For the general high school populace, it does not discourage them. If they have access, they will get on it and they will do it over and over again.
Okay, thank you. Corinne.
Okay, we have just implemented the Yonder bags in our school this year. And what we have them do is they come in, they take the bags, put theirs in there, and take them with them. So they have the bags, but they're locked up. This has been very handy because, one, you know who has put their phones in a bag, and two, they're responsible for them themselves. At the end of the day, they come to the designated locations and unlock them, and they're free to go. So it helps with a lot of things. And you were talking about, Tawny, that you're constantly having to police this. It kind of takes care of some of that policing itself, because we know because the bags are left if they haven't gone ahead and put their bag or put their phone in their bag. So it does take care of that. I know it's a little more expensive, but there are definite benefits to them.
Okay, Erica.
It's an interesting argument to hear that if students have access to this, they will keep going to it. They will find a way. They will do it. We hear quite the opposite argument when we are asking for child sexual abuse material to be removed from school libraries, right? We hear that students should be responsible, and just because it's there doesn't mean that they'll access that. So I find that very interesting. I do agree also with the comment in the chat that the devices are designed to be addictive. That's absolutely true. And that goes back to my comment about any of this being disingenuous if we don't have serious changes in school issued devices, because the same thing applies there.
Thank you, Erica. Any other comments before we take this to a vote?
Okay, we'll go ahead and have that poll pop up on your screen, and you can make your decision based on this motion. And just a reminder, this is voting on if high school students should have their phones or their personal devices stored in a location not accessible to them. So it looks like that motion went ahead and passed, which means that it will be recommended that high school students store their personal devices in a secure location throughout the school day. So we do have time for one more motion to get through today. And I don't want to speak for Brian, but I know that we're both really proud that we've gotten through a lot today and you guys have been working really hard. So,
I completely agree.
Yeah. So our last motion is for today, our last motion is on emergency management. And this is unique because it actually has 4 different options that you could choose from. So you can go ahead and read through those, and then if anybody wants to make a motion, we'll go ahead and address you.
Okay, Katie, would you like to make a motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion for option A, that we recommend districts to develop robust safety and emergency procedures that are not dependent on students contacting authorities or family via personal devices.
Okay, do we have a second? Lindsay?
I second that motion.
Okay, thank you. We have a motion and a second. Can we open it up for discussion now? Kim?
I just wanted to share what national school security experts say about students having access to phones in emergency situations. They outline about 4 different reasons why students are less safe. The first one being if you're in that situation where there's a crisis going on and all the students in the classroom are on their phone and they're distracted and they're not listening to the trained teacher give directions. And that could put them in harm's way. Second, if they are in a hiding situation, their phone dings or lights up, then they could be found. Third is if they're texting families, rumors, and so forth can be put forth, and parents could rush the school and get in the way of first responders. They've also shared about how sometimes students will live stream on social media what's happening and how harmful that can be. So the research from and the direction of school security folks say it's best to not rely on students having devices.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Erica.
Every single one of those concerns can also be a concern on a school device. Number one. Number two, when you look at what happened in the Uvalde school shooting, when the first responders refused to respond, there was documentation that was extremely important from personal devices that was needed for that. Number three, I think probably many of you may have seen that recently a KU professor was let go because he was using violent words in his classroom. And the only reason that professor isn't there today is because a student was able to film that and expose that they didn't feel safe having a professor talk like that. And if it was their word against the professor's word, don't know that that would necessarily happen. So there's an argument to be made that a personal device is also a safety device. And I think there's also good considerations in terms of what do you do with devices when you're in an emergency situation, you know, like the technical version of the stop, drop, and roll that you learned as a little kid about when there's a fire, right? Or the different drills that we do. And then that can be added on. Dealing with technology can be added on to that. But any of the concerns about technology that are there, when I think they're legitimate, are also there for the school devices.
Kim.
I just wanted to add that I think with schools developing robust safety and emergency procedures, that will put a lot of ease or add comfort to parents that have concerns. But if those emergency and safety plans are well communicated to the community, that will help parents know that their children are safe and what the plan is, and everybody can be on the same page.
Okay, thank you, Kim. Anna.
I would just put out there that, you know, the training that we've received as teachers, at least, you know, at the schools I've been at, is that in the case of an emergency situation when a lockdown is happening, students would be directed to get off their school device. And so, like, maybe it's different in other schools, but that's my, you know, the training I've received, which is far different than a device in your pocket. That if a teacher has a class of 20, 30 kids in it, you know, policing that in an emergency situation during a lockdown, keeping quiet, you know, and that kind of thing, like, you can close a school device. You can't do that with a personal device. And so, you know, my experience does not align with, you know, some of the comments that have been made here, about, you know, the comparison between a personal and a school device here during an emergency. So I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Anna. Lindsay.
I think as we think about this motion and a device independent safety plan, that part of that safety plan does need to be instructions on what to do with school devices in an emergency, as well as instructions for how teachers, faculty, staff are managing their personal devices during that emergency. It's not just about the school children and their personal devices.
Okay, Tana. Go ahead.
So my thought is, because I agree with what was just said, my thought is that maybe, I don't think any of us don't think there shouldn't be a robust safety and emergency plan in school districts. I think that is fair to assume. And so maybe that option needs to be amended to add that it might be device free, but there needs to be some education on what to do with the device or how to handle the device in that situation, rather than just saying it's device free versus not device free. Because there is some need, if a school's evacuated, for kids that might not get to the evacuation zone to be able to just, let someone know where they are. Or, if a kid is hiding in a closet, to let someone know where they are. And so I think that added to that might, I don't know if we can, but might be, education on what to do with those devices during an emergency versus just device free.
Okay. Thank you, Melanie.
A point of order, I guess. So option A and option C would be exclusive of each other. Is there an opportunity for someone, as Tana points out, after we vote on A, could someone then potentially bring option B since it's not in conflict with A? I realize that does not go with the instructions you gave at the beginning of the call, so you can tell me no. I just wanted to point out that in this instance, the two could coexist.
I think we will stick with our protocol and leave it up to the original motion maker if they want to amend that. Scott?
Yes, I was going to suggest a friendly amendment that we would add school devices, personal devices, and school devices to option A there. If the maker of the motion would accept that.
I'll speak up just with my question is that we're in the personal device section. So is there any conflict of blending these together?
Katie, you were the original motion maker, correct?
Yes.
It's up to you if you want to make the motion to amend that. That's your call.
Okay, then I would like to amend it and make a recommendation that districts develop robust safety and emergency procedures that are not dependent on students contacting authorities or family via personal devices or school-issued devices.
Thank you.
Okay, do we have a second on Katie's amendment? Lindsay?
I second that motion.
Okay, we are a little short on. We probably will have to limit the discussion to about 5 minutes on the amendment because we've hit the 10 minutes on the original discussion. So, Erica.
Question about liability to the school district. And maybe the answer is determined at the local school board if this motion were to pass. But just wondering if there was, let's say, a bell-to-bell ban on phones, and then a child was in a safety situation that they could have gotten out of if they had a personal device and they were injured or worse, holding the district liable for that.
Brian.
I just don't think we should get caught in liability because I can make an argument for liability for allowing a student to have a device. Life has liability attached to it, and I think what we do is we take the direction that receives the recommendations of experts as well as best practices for us. And for those of you who are in a school, for those of us who have been in school, we know that in an emergency situation, students do not use devices appropriately. And it's actually more dangerous to have them with a device than without.
Thank you, Brian. Scott.
Yeah, I think it's if you actually read the motion, um, and really try to get an understanding of it, this is really talking about developing safety plans that do not require them to use either their personal devices or school issued devices, and pretty much everything we have heard from law enforcement and authorities say that they don't want kids on those devices. It does not preclude that those devices can be used in an emergency situation to contact notifying of location. It doesn't really say that there. It just says that they're not dependent on that.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Camille.
Scott kind of summed it up for me because I'm thinking really it falls on the district to make sure that information gets out to parents in a timely manner. I know I wouldn't want any of my students having to fumble with the cell phone trying to call a family member because there's, something really bad going on. So I definitely think that the districts have to put their heads together and figure out how are they going to contact families so that that burden does not fall on the students.
Okay, thank you. Any other discussion before we move this to a vote?
Okay, you'll go ahead and see that poll pop up again, and you can go ahead and make your decision. Just a reminder, this is voting that we recommend districts develop robust safety and emergency procedures that are not dependent on students contacting authorities or family via personal devices or school issued devices. So make sure that you have that amendment in there when you're thinking about your decision. We're going to go ahead and do a last call on this motion. Again, if you were able to vote, please just let us know.
Ava, I'd never received the poll.
Okay, we'll turn that over to KSDE to see if they can make sure to get your vote.
Lori, if you double check if you have more than one monitor that it didn't pop up somewhere else. And if you want to go ahead and send me directly your vote, we can make sure it's reflected in the count.
It was. I had moved it and it was behind something,
Okay.
so I apologize.
So it looks like that motion did pass. We will recommend that districts develop robust safety and emergency procedures that are not dependent on students contacting authorities or family via personal or school devices. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Brian.
Okay, thanks, Ava. We just really want to say thank you to everybody. We made a lot of progress today, and it felt like we had a nice rhythm with the work that we were doing. KSD is going to send out a first draft of this section to you sometime probably early next week, and you're going to have a chance to look at it and leave comments. And then next week when we get together, we're going to be voting on recommendations for screen time and mental health, and we'll try to get through that work. And have a great day, everybody.